The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of Green Acres and our guests. These general gardening tips and suggestions may work for you, as well as those from alternative sources. When using any garden products or tools, read and follow all label directions. And learn how to make your yard summer strong at bewatersmart.info.
The Green Acres Garden Podcast is the podcast dedicated to helping gardeners hone their growing skills while we celebrate our love of plants. So whether you're new to growing or a seasoned gardener, you're sure to learn something new. Join the fun as we have conversations with world-class growers, passionate green thumbs, and professional garden experts from Green Acres Nursery and Supply. Listen every week. We'll answer questions you didn't know you had. And away we grow. Welcome, everyone, to the show. So glad you could make it. Thanks for tuning in. This is the Green Acres Garden Podcast, the home for all you plant lovers out there. My name is Kevin Jordan, your happy host, back in studio for another great episode. Actually, a really unique episode because we had to sit down on Zoom with Carol Connare, Editor-in-Chief of the Old Farmer's Almanac. It was so cool, such an interesting topic we got to discuss. And from the perspective of a gardener, it was really cool. You're going to see things in there like helpful tips, weather forecasts, really fascinating stories that are historical and some that are relevant to today. Really cool stuff. I had a blast talking with her. Austin, did you enjoy our interview?
Oh, I had a blast. Carol was really, really great. And I've been enjoying reading this. In preparation for this, our producer Greg hooked us up with a bunch of copies of the Almanac, and I've been reading it. I've been enjoying it. It's nice to have a paperback in hand that's small, and there's a cool little like punch out in the corner, so you could like hang it on the wall or put it on the
hang it on a nail inside your barn there.
And the writing's humorous. I really enjoy the writing style. It's not ridiculously humorous, but it's just got this little tinge of fun, and that's kind of what we do
quirky.
here. Right?
I told Carol, I'm like, their motto is very similar to what our approach is here. Their motto is useful with a pleasant degree of humor,
and you know what? That's perfect.
That's what I aspire towards. If I could do that at all, I think we've hit a mark there. So, I mean, I loved it. It was really interesting to hear about the weather, the forecasting, their belief system there, the history. I mean, this is the newest edition is the 233rd version of this book.
Oh my gosh.
So the book has been around just only like 20-something years.
It's incredible.
Younger than our nation. So it's pretty cool. People have been reading this book longer than they've been eating tomatoes.
That is wild. Yeah, I learned about tomatoes in this. So let's go ahead and jump into the interview because Carol touches on that and so many things. I'm really excited to share this with everyone. We met up with Carol over Zoom. She's the editor-in-chief of the Almanac. Let's go ahead and jump into that and meet her now. Here we go.
So I'm here with Carol Connare, Editor-in-Chief of the Old Farmer's Almanac. Carol, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Well, first of all, thank you for being here. What a treat. This is such a unique opportunity to speak with somebody who's kind of on the inside of the media world when it comes to agriculture, gardening, and all things connected. So I'm really excited to have you here. First of all, for those of our listeners who maybe don't know, what is the Old Farmer's Almanac?
Oh, the Old Farmer's Almanac is, well, in its very, very beginning, it was a calendar. It's been around since 1792, so 233 years.
It's almost as old as our nation. Got it.
George Washington, who I think was president the second time when we first published. So
incredible.
It's not that long ago, yet it feels like a long time ago. But back then, every other person grew their own food. They were a farmer and they grew for others. And so when we didn't have forecasts and we didn't have things like information about, all weather related or growing related, this is what people relied on. And it's still the same formulas we use today, in terms of what advice we give gardeners is frankly age old. Yet there's new twists to everything, right?
Certainly. I was actually going to ask you, so you really were very well known for the weather and your predictions. I mean, anytime you ask somebody about the Old Farmer's Almanac, you're like, what kind of summer are we going to get? What kind of winter is this going to be? So what actually goes into the predictions that are in here? I got a copy of the Old Farmer's Almanac, the 2025 edition. Got to say, I'm really enjoying it so far. Yay. And I was saying it's really cool to see some of the weather predictions, and I've got to learn a little bit more about it. But can you please explain how do you come up with your predictions? Because I saw for winter 24, 25, I saw some predictions there, which I'm liking, actually. And so what actually goes into that?
Well, as I said, we start out as a calendar, but really what an almanac is, a way for gardeners and growers to think about what's coming ahead. And really our science is based on sun science. So I feel like it's kind of this idea about the sun and the moon, they're on our cover. The sun really governs our weather, it governs our atmosphere. The moon really governs the earth, which is we're growers of any kind, whether you're a houseplant parent for an air plant to, a backyard vegetable garden that feeds your whole family. You're thinking about weather and about patterns, right? And so from the beginning, our founder, Robert B. Thomas, he was an astronomer. And so since his time, well, before his time, there's been 25. We're embarking on cycle 26 of sun cycles. They're 11-year cycles. People who are seeing the aurora further south than they ever did, this is the result of a very active end of the 25th cycle. So really what we do is our long range forecasting formula is based on patterns of sun, those magnetic storms on the sun. And so we can crunch data now with many tools. Back in Robert B. Thomas's time, it was really paper and pen, and we have some of those records, which are really cool. This is like data crunching, pencils. So, but it's really the same thing. It's about looking at patterns, and it's looking at things that are beyond our control still, the way the oceans swirl and the way the atmospheres react and the temperatures at bay. But every grower that I know is seeing so many changes right now. And that's, I think, what makes the interest in the almanac right now, more intense than ever is that.
Good to know. Yeah, because I was really excited too, and I read reading up on planting by the moon's phase and that whole section, and the lunar planting, and how potentially the moon may affect our seeds. I mean, it has a great effect. Like I said, it rules the earth, has an amazing effect on the water on our planet. You see that with the tides and whatnot. So, when it comes to you, what are your thoughts on that, and what can gardeners glean from your book in that regard?
Oh my goodness, this is the number one question, Kevin. And
it's so fascinating.
And it's the most simple thing, I mean, for friends of mine that don't live on the coast, I don't live on the coast, but I've been on the coast, and it's so evident the moon's pull on the water, and the earth is 75% water. We're 75% water. Plants are 90% water.
Oh yeah.
Any of us making, seeds, trying to grow things from seeds know that's the basic thing. And so the moon pulls water. We know this. And there's a 28-day cycle. So if we're thinking about moon gardening, the very essence of it is it's that things that are in a waxing moon, like right now, we've got another day and a half basically till the full moon, and thinking kind of going toward the light, right? Like go to the light.
Oh, yeah.
Things above ground, including us, are active and growing. And then we, at the waning, right? The waxing is the growing, the waning, and then that'll happen after the full moon. It's kind of this time of, okay, attention to what's underground. So in the growing realm, that means very basically, like if you're trying to sprout things up, do that in the waxing moon. And then if you're trying to grow root vegetables or transplant things or happen things underground, you want the moon's energy to be pulling that water back into the earth. If I'm growing beets or potatoes. And so that's our ancestors' science, and that's really what the almanac provides today, which is still working, and people want to know anew because they've decided that, maybe growing their own things is a pretty good idea on a lot of levels.
That's so cool. I love this idea of just kind of utilizing past knowledge with kind of today's understanding and technology, and kind of seeing where that goes forward. I was reading your section on phenology, and it was really interesting where it started connecting different activities in the garden to what's actually happening out in nature. So if something's blooming now, then something else is also happening. Can you talk about that at all? Because that was really fascinating.
Absolutely. And I think, in a way, it's easier to talk about in the way that things are being disrupted. So, if we have a warming world, or if spring's coming earlier to some of us who are growing, that means the people, I was gonna say people, the birds, the birds that were meant to be there to do the pollinating, or on those blossoms, or feeding, or have whatever is in that ecosystem isn't happening at the same time. Say that those blooms, those blossoms are food for those birds, but they don't know that it's happening earlier. There becomes a disruption. And so in terms of thinking about that, our ancestors would say, like, okay, the forsythia is blooming, and so now it's time to put in the peas. I mean, that's kind of in the idea of looking to nature. Woolly bear. I've seen so many woolly bear caterpillars in the last 3 days, and that is the brownest band I ever saw, which makes me feel so good about our weather forecast, which is mild, 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 because the bigger that brown band and the smaller the black ones, like they're preparing for a pretty mild winter as well. Just the stuff like that.
Yeah, just magical little tidbits like that. It's really cool, the biological kind of markers, I guess, and touchstones that we can look to
I
in there.
think pollinators are a fascination with people right now too. Like we were seeing the birds and the bees and the butterflies and the moths, and we're understanding what the role they play, and that our plants, weeds in some cases, really, in most cases, are really you know, in my little permaculture orchard, it's like you leave weeds behind because they attract pollinators throughout, as many months as possible. And you want that because you want them to continue to be attracted for food and for winter refuge, and have a place to be, that's sustainable for them, because that's really the ecosystem. It begins with them.
I've noticed in your newer edition, you have a whole thing on like trends from the last year and trends that you're seeing right now in and around the home or the garden. You brought up the pollinators. Are there any other trends that you're seeing that are taking place right now that are kind of something unique to our time that hasn't been so in the past?
Yes, very much so. I think there's a few things that will ring true with people everywhere. AI, is actually part of growing. We can actually be better at pest management that is low interference. We can be smarter in ways that, that's a good side of things. Even robots that can pick things more efficiently, not to replace people, but that would spoil us. 40% of food waste, 40% of that stream is food waste. We don't want that to happen. We want people to have good food. But I think other exciting things are, lots of tolerant plants are being introduced, lots of miniature varieties for container planting. So anybody who has a windowsill, or, a patio or a back stoop, can also grow their own cucumbers and tomatoes, which, is really important. And those are not just food sources, they're sources of well-being. There's so many proven things that say that if you're just tending a plant, you're going to feel better, and that color and that light is all good for us.
Amen, sister. You're preaching to the choir here, Carol. I love what you're saying, but I thought it was so fascinating because we haven't talked about it enough in this on this podcast. But you guys had something that mentioned growing grain in the garden. Did you remember that article at all?
Absolutely.
What were your thoughts on that? Because I thought it was kind of interesting. We don't talk a lot about it here, but I read the article and I was like, you know what? This might be something there. It's kind of fun to think about growing some grain that's actually edible that you could go out and harvest and winnow and collect. Yeah, you're probably not going to go out and start a bakery anytime soon, but it might be kind of fun.
Yeah, right. Also, I think there's so much value in diversifying one's crop by their interests, and the idea of growing grains, exactly like you said. Uh, if you look back at the Almanac, and I love these digitized versions because you can go back and actually, our farmers are talking in the late 1700s, how do we grow grain in New England on a large scale? We want to be able to bake bread. We want to be able to feed ourselves. Grain is so important to our livestock and to us, And I think the other thing I feel about grains is it's possible. Beginner gardeners can try it, right? Yeah, you can't, as you said, grow enough to do maybe some large scale thing, but why couldn't you try it? And then who knows, maybe your community garden design, gets some land and you can grow grains. I mean, I think it's such bread and like a day of flour and grains. There's such an essence of things that we have forgotten. I don't, traveling around, like to say Europe, they have these grist mills everywhere and they don't separate. Like the whole grain really is the whole grain that's still alive when you buy it. And we've given that away in this country. So, what would it be like to grow your own millet or grow your own sorghum or grow your own, whatever it is you want to try and see what that feels like in your hand and in your mortar and pestle. Even if you made a few cups of something and you made something with it, I think you really learn something and you make some decisions based on that after that.
Yeah, for sure. I read the story, the article, the tortoise and the tomato. Tomato, I mean, if I get paid $1 for every time I say tomato, I feel like. We talk about it so often here. We love our tomatoes. It is the royalty of the summer garden. And you guys had a great collection of kind of a little vignette of different stories that kind of interwoven through the tomato itself. And so what were your thoughts on that article, being the editor-in-chief? I'm sure you have to read all of this.
Well, actually, yeah, our team helps decide everything all together. But I think, as you said, we can't give our readers and our audiences enough tomatoes. That idea, like you
Oh,
said, to
yeah.
have known as the flavor. And also, yeah, it's got a great history. It wasn't always a beloved thing. It really didn't come into fashion. People didn't like it. Is it a fruit? Is it a vegetable? There's lots of fun things about it and how it actually became a commercial product. If you read the story,
Oh,
it
yeah.
goes for a Galapagos turtle, which is something altogether amazing. So the story is by Bill Alexander. So we'll give him credit, who wrote a book on this subject. But the idea was that we couldn't commercially have tomatoes because of the stem on the tomato would always puncture the tomato. It was too stiff, and they couldn't figure out a way to genetically change this. And so to process them, in a mass processing way was impossible because it would just get stabbed by its own stem. But somehow the seeds that were transported, so the Galapagos turtle eats these seeds and reprocesses them through their eating and regenerating the seeds. And in that way, they were able to hybridize a jointless, it's called, like, I think, jointless tomato. And that led to the ability to mass process them and put them in cans and other containers, which, kind of revolutionized the tomato. So it's all about, and it was like this rare pair, I think, of Galapagos turtles. So it was like not really, they had been endangered. So it was you've got to read the story, as we said, but it's something like that, and it's about those turtles and the seeds.
That's pretty close. I just read it a little bit ago, and that's pretty spot on. That's great. Yeah, the part I read, it was like there was someone here trying to germinate those seeds, couldn't germinate them. He was like, dude, these seeds won't germinate. So he sent them to a friend who had a Galapagos tortoise. He fed the tomatoes to or whatever, the seeds to the tortoise. Tortoise eats it, excretes it. Boom, they germinate. So the tortoise and the tomato, fantastic tale. Definitely, I mean, I don't want to bury the lead or spoil it for anybody, so definitely give that one a shot. I got to say, Carol, a lot of fun little tidbits in there. Like I said, it's useful with definitely a pleasant degree of humor. What does it take? What kind of work goes into kind of cranking one of these out? You're the editor-in-chief. What does that really mean? What are your responsibilities? And how did you get here? How did this all happen for you?
So it's really a team. We have a really cool team of editors, and we're in charge of different things. But everybody really contributes to the print almanac. You'll see there's a story on cat behaviors by my colleague Heidi Stonehill, who's been at the almanac for 20 years. People love to know about cats. Why are they kneading? Why do they blap? What is the whole deal with catnip? So I think when we think about the editorial lineup, we're trying to be entertaining for you all year. We understand you, as you said, excretion is a way of life, but we might be in your bathroom. And so, the idea that it could be useful all year
Okay.
long or entertaining. Or, my nephew has some horses in Kentucky, and he loves to show me the picture of it on the nail in his barn, like it has a hole in the corner still. Like, what can be useful all year long, what can be entertaining. You might not want to know, there's a story about how to stay cool without air conditioning. You might want to know that later this year and next summer, but this idea of what would be sort of a good winter read for someone who likes to grow tomatoes. What are we curious about? I wrote about an asteroid Bennu, who's, a near Earth object to us. The just like you said, the most basic story, we always get asked, what does it mean to garden by the moon? Can we just give people that information that is age old in a way that's understandable today?
Yeah.
There's that story, alongside how to kind of cheat the climate. Like if you want figs in, New England, how are you going to do that? You're going to put that in your garage, or, this idea of people who move south and they miss their lilacs or their daffodils. What could they have, that makes them feel the same way? So, there's some fanciful things, but I think it's all this idea of connection to the earth, connection to the moon and the sun and the planets and the weather.
Certainly. I love it. It's really cool. Now, Carol, I don't want to spoil it too much, but can you give me like a Groundhog's Day-esque kind of prediction for, I'm here in Northern California, mind you, for our winter this year and maybe even next summer?
Ooh, so I think what you're going to see all over the US is going to be mild. This is a mild winter weather. So that's what we're predicting. Though we'll see sort of snow kind of in the middle of the country. That's really what we're saying, and that the cold blasts, they'll come, but not. It's going to be we were really predicting next summer to be another record-breaking warm summer, really in so many places. And if it's not too warm and hot, it's going to be super rainy. So for where you are, I'm not sure how north you are, but you're going to, I think, be on that rainier side, is from what I remember on the map.
Our winters tend to be a little bit rainy, and our summers are scorching hot and dry.
So I think you're going to have more of the same right where you are. And that's the story we're calling for.
Okay, I'll get my shade cloth ready.
Yeah, right.
Well, Carol, if there's anything else you want to share with us before we let you go, now is your chance.
Yeah, sure. So what we're busy on right now, we're promoting, of course, the 2025 Almanac, but we're putting the finishing touches on our 2025 Garden Guide, which is our annual publication. It's a full-size magazine size, once-a-year publication that covers everything from vegetables and herbs and DIY projects, critters in the garden, pollinators. Again, acting on the trends section in a way of what we see in the Almanac, but really bringing it right down to earth with the gardeners and, plant picks and suggestions. And what you said about phrenology earlier, a whole piece on this idea of spring arriving at different times in different places these days and what that's doing. So a lot of things. Love to come back and talk about it. I love this podcast, and I love podcasting in general. I feel like it's a real antidote to AI and content production. I mean, that's not content production, right? That's like language production. But this idea that, we can talk directly to one another, and whether I'm learning from the person who put this garden in, or someone could, come to me and learn from me, and I can pass that knowledge. That's really the idea of the Almanac. So I think, that's inspiring every day. Like we hear from our readers. They call us, they get called back. They email us, we answer. They write us letters. It happens, and that's a gift.
Pretty cool. Well, here's to another couple hundred years.
Hey.
I hope you guys keep the good times coming. I hope our listeners can give it a chance and consider it. But thank you, Carol Connare, Editor-in-Chief of the Old Farmer's Almanac. Thank you so much for being here, Carol.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we are back from our interview with Carol. Big thank you to Carol. Kevin, I see you smiling. You had a good time.
For sure.
What did you think?
She was fantastic. Carol came with it, had tons of knowledge, great energy, and just a wonderful interview overall. So thank you to Carol. I really loved it. I couldn't help but get giddy when I was thinking about the tortoise and the tomato.
Yeah.
So think about all the pizzas and pasta sauce you've ever had. That wouldn't be possible. All this delicious pasta sauce that we're used to.
If it wasn't for that tortoise.
If it wasn't for the digestive system of a tortoise. If that tortoise didn't poop out those tomato seeds and make them viable for germination. I mean, the
That
world,
is
we'd never
wild.
have those production
I
tomatoes
can't
that we're
imagine
used to.
that. We would be living in a different reality. That's
Yeah.
just not everyone's number one crop. It seems is tomato.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
So
and that's wild.
I love those stories. Honestly, just the lunar stuff, the moon phases, all of it kind of intrigued me. The weather predictions, the frost dates even. I know we have a lot of people that are always asking us on the forums here, and when is our first and last frost?
Right.
And we don't really ever really want to come out and say what day, because honestly, I can't say for certain. But they have some predictions on there that you can look at. And so they have Sacramento, where we live, right on there, and it tells you first frost, last frost. Now, it's their prediction, so you could take it or leave it, but it definitely gives you something to shoot for, or something
Yeah,
to kind of
ballpark.
work around,
Yeah.
for sure. So everything, I thought, those are all things that from the gardener's perspective, I think you can take away from that. And honestly, it just felt good to kind of touch paper and read again. And I felt like I was in the 90s, dude. It was cool.
We got to get you some more books.
Yeah, I just love it. Honestly, just the smell of paper. I felt like I was in a book club now, and I actually read the book, so I felt prepared. It was cool. So our straw hats off to her and her team out there. Pretty cool stuff. I know they're fired up, and she mentioned a garden guide that they release every February that is aimed at just getting people just more knowledge, just additional information and techniques that are up to date, and just hopefully helping as many people as possible to be as successful as they can be out in their gardens and maybe even on their farms.
Yeah, look forward to that coming out. And it was a treat to meet Carol, so thank you again. And Kevin, go ahead and take us out.
Well, here we go. This episode was out of this world. It was lunar, baby. So I hope all of our listeners enjoyed it. Thanks again to Carol. Until next week, garden friends, please get outside, have some fun, get in that garden. Fall is for planting. Happy gardening to you all, and please never stop growing.